Hi. My name is Malik. I'm 30, male, and a paralegal at a defense firm in Chicago. I buried my father on a bitterly cold Thursday morning. He was my only parent, my compass, and my greatest teacher. But before his casket had even touched the dirt, my cousins had already started spending his money. I didn't know it then. Not as I gave a eulogy through clenched teeth and frozen fingers. Not as I clutched the folded flag from his Navy service and nodded politely to people I barely recognized. But something was wrong. Something was off. It started with a whisper. A careless laugh from my cousin Rami, standing a little too far from the grave, checking his phone during the burial. New rims already? His brother chuckled under his breath. Then a low reply. Dad said to strike while the market's hot. Better to use it before the lawyers tie it up. I froze. But grief plays tricks on you, right? Maybe I misheard. Maybe I imagined it. So I brushed it off. Until the reception that evening. That's when it all came tumbling down. We were in the living room of my aunt's house, the morning room, as they called it. But there was no mourning going on. There was laughter. Glasses clinking. And talk of a quick closing on the Florida condo and a wire transfer already sorted. What? Condo? What transfer? My father didn't own anything in Florida. That's when I noticed Rami and his sister Lena, the two golden children of the family, huddled in the corner, beaming over a new real estate app. Showing pictures of a beachfront property. Tiled floors. Infinity pool. Marble counters. Purchased. In cash. I had just used my last paycheck to cover part of the funeral cost. I pulled Lena aside. Where did you get the money? I asked, trying to sound casual. That place must have cost. She cut me off. Smiled. Oh Malik, you're so dramatic. Uncle didn't have time to update the will. He told Dad to take care of it. Take care of what? Of us, she said, sipping wine. You're single? No kids. He wanted the money to go where it would help people. I couldn't breathe. She turned to leave. Anyway, you work in law or whatever. You know how this stuff goes. Yes, I do. And I knew something was deeply, irreversibly wrong. That night, I sat in my father's old recliner with my laptop open and one word echoing in my head. Beneficiary. I logged into the estate portal. Access denied. I used my old credentials. Still nothing. Then I tried something desperate, a copy of his login I had saved from setting up his phone 2 years ago. And that's when my stomach dropped. The account was drained. $1.4 million. Gone. Logged withdrawals, transfers to trusts I'd never seen before. And the last login was from Rami's IP address. 2 days before my father died. I stared at the screen. Not even 48 hours after my father's last breath, they were already spending his life's work. He raised them. Paid for their school. Covered their bail when they messed up. And they couldn't even wait for the funeral to end before looting his legacy. I was shaking. But I didn't scream. Didn't call. Didn't confront. Because that's not what my father taught me to do. He taught me to build quietly. And strike with precision. So I started taking screenshots. Opening folders. Naming documents. Creating backups. And as the last guest left the reception, I smiled at Lena and Rami and said, "Thanks for coming. Let me know if you need anything." Because they had no idea what was coming next. The week after the funeral felt like falling into a snowbank, silent, numb, and heavy. I called the estate attorney my father had mentioned over coffee just a few weeks before he died. A soft-spoken man named Gerald, who'd helped Dad set up a living trust 2 years prior. Dad had said, "If anything happens to me, Malik, you call Gerald. He'll know." But when I called, Gerald hesitated. "Mr. Malik. I'm sorry, but I've been informed I'm no longer representing your father's estate." "What?" "Your uncle, Samir, presented new documents shortly before your father passed. Powers of attorney. Signed, dated. The firm transferred everything under legal advisement." I sat in silence. "Malik, Gerald continued, I'm not saying I agree with it. But unless you're contesting the documents, I can't do anything." "Contest?" He was telling me my uncle presented papers just before my father died, changing everything. Power of attorney. New executorship. No mention of me. And then he hung up. I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was being systematically erased. First from the trust. Then from the group chats. Rami removed me from the family decisions thread we'd created when Dad got sick. Then the lawyers stopped returning my emails. Then I found out Lena had taken possession of the apartment my father had left to me, the one where I'd spent every weekend helping him rehab the floors. She listed it on Airbnb. My childhood bedroom was now a rental unit for bachelorette parties. At first, I tried to play it the legal way. I submitted requests for the new documents. They stalled. I filed a notice of inquiry through the court. Still nothing. Then my aunt sent me a message. Please don't drag this out. Your dad wanted peace. Let him rest. Let him rest? They were sipping champagne by his pool. The final blow came 3 weeks later. A letter. Certified. From Samir's lawyer. This is a formal notification that your presence on any of the estate's properties will be considered trespassing. Trespassing? On my father's land. The land he said would be mine one day. I didn't cry. Didn't punch a wall. I just picked up the framed picture of Dad on my desk. His navy uniform. His tired eyes. And I made a promise. I'll get every penny back. With interest. Not just to reclaim what's mine, but to expose every lie they told to do it. Because they thought freezing me out would break me. All they did was give me a colder reason to burn them down. At this point, I was no longer grieving a father, I was hunting ghosts. Ghosts of promises. Ghosts of papers that should have protected me. And the one ghost that mattered most? My father's will. The original one. The one he said he finalized a year before he died, leaving everything to me. He made it a point to tell me. You're the only one who's ever shown up when I needed help. You earned this. I already made sure it's all written down. I believed him. I trusted him. And that trust was about to be tested harder than I ever thought possible. The first time I tried to obtain the original will from the city's probate registry, I was met with silence. The clerk searched by name, date, even by the lawyer's firm. Nothing. No document filed under my father's name in the last 2 years. The only will on record? A handwritten one, witnessed by Samir and Lena, dated just 5 days before Dad died. A will that left everything to his beloved siblings and extended family for their care and support during his final days. Support? Rami didn't even visit him in the hospital. Lena? She showed up once, cried for 10 minutes, and left with his phone charger. I requested a certified copy. And when I read it, I felt sick. It was generic. Cold. Like it had been written with one goal, cut me out cleanly. No mention of our shared projects. No thanks for helping him through chemo. No personal touches at all. Just line after line of bequests to family. As if I never existed. I called Gerald again, the attorney Dad had trusted. This time, I wasn't gentle. You told me you had a copy of the original will. A pause. I did. What happened to it? I was instructed by the family's new legal representative to transfer all files to them when my contract was terminated. That included your father's will. Did you keep a copy? Another pause. This one longer. No. I shouldn't have even told you that much. I sat in the dark that night with a folder full of nothing. No will. No proof. No leverage. Until I remembered something Dad once told me over lunch. I keep everything that matters where no one would think to look, where I can still touch it when I drive. And then it hit me. His glove box. The next day, I drove 3 hours to the auto yard where his car had been impounded after the hospital retrieved his belongings. I bribed the night staff with $200 and a six-pack to let me look inside. And there it was. Under old maps and gas station receipts. A sealed manila envelope labeled in Dad's blocky handwriting. Malik, only if things go sideways. Inside, the original notarized will, a handwritten letter to me, a USB drive. I read every word of that letter like it was gospel. If they're trying to take this from you, it means I was right not to trust them. Use what's in here. And don't let them rewrite my story. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up making copies, taking photos, emailing it all to myself 10 different ways. Because I wasn't just back in the fight. I had the ammunition now. And soon, they were going to find out what happens when you try to erase a man who keeps receipts, in every sense of the word. The night I found the real will, I didn't scream. I didn't celebrate. I just stared at that USB drive for hours like it was a bomb I wasn't sure how to disarm. Inside that little piece of plastic was everything: emails, financial statements, even recordings my dad made of conversations with Samir and Lena where they discussed making things simple after he passed. My father had been sick, but never stupid. He saw the betrayal coming. And now, so would I. But I couldn't go in guns blazing. Not yet. Because people like Samir and Lena? They don't respond to direct attacks. They respond to whispers in expensive dining rooms. To rumors. To passive-aggressive side glances at family events. So I played the part. The next weekend was Lena's birthday dinner, an annual flex where she reserved a private room at the top-floor steakhouse downtown and made sure every waiter knew her name before she walked in. I went. Wore a sleek black suit. No tie. Just enough beard to make me look tired but dangerous. And I smiled. A lot. Malik? Lena practically shrieked. Didn't think you'd come. I wouldn't miss it, I replied smoothly, family is everything. She flinched. Just a little. Samir offered me a drink. I declined. Then picked up my own bottle of wine and poured for him instead. To trust, I toasted. The kind that doesn't disappear when someone's not in the room. Half the table went quiet. They thought I didn't know. Didn't suspect. Didn't care. But every fork that clinked, every eyebrow that twitched, it all told me one thing. They were nervous. And nervous people talk. That night, after the creme brulee and bragging about stock portfolios, I followed Samir outside while he smoked. You know, he muttered, I'm glad you came. I've been meaning to talk to you. About the will? I said flatly. He looked stunned. Just for a second. Then forced a laugh. Oh. That. I didn't even know he had a new one. Of course you didn't, I said, sipping wine. He stared at me. You're bluffing. Sure, I smirked. Just like you were bluffing when you told Gerald he was fired and not to speak to me again. His face paled. Look, Malik, things moved quickly. You weren't in the meetings. You mean the ones where you had him sign a fake will in his last week alive? That stopped him cold. I leaned in. I've got the real one. I've got the letter. And I've got the drive. He swallowed hard. You wouldn't. Oh, I haven't yet, I smiled. But I will. I just want to see how far you're willing to go to bury me alive. Then I turned and walked away. I spent the next 2 weeks dropping breadcrumbs. An anonymous email to Lena with an attachment titled Do You Think He Knows? A burned CD of audio clips left in Rami's mailbox. A printed copy of the original will mailed, without a return address, to Lena's husband's office. And then, silence. No denials. No confrontation. Just one missed call from Gerald's private number. And a week later? A subpoena. Filed anonymously. But requesting probate reevaluation of my father's estate. The game was on. And I wasn't just playing defense anymore. I learned early in life that liars forget details. But paper remembers everything. And now that I had the real will, I wasn't going to let emotion ruin what needed to be a surgical strike. I started with Gerald. My father's attorney. The only man who truly understood the legal shape of my father's legacy, and the only one who knew where the bodies were buried. He had gone quiet after Dad's death. Too quiet. I arranged a casual lunch. Steakhouse. Neutral ground. Gerald arrived in a gray overcoat, his eyes tired, his lips pressed in a permanent frown. I thought we weren't talking, he said, sliding into the booth. I dropped the USB on the table. You broke client confidentiality the moment you pretended that draft from 5 years ago was my father's final wish, I said calmly. Now you're going to help me unbreak it. He looked at the USB like it was radioactive. Then, slowly, he nodded. What followed was a month-long excavation. Emails between Gerald and Samir, clearly pushing to bypass probate. A digital trail of bank transfers, small at first, then massive. A notarized power of attorney document that my father had revoked but Gerald had quietly forgotten to submit. I backed everything up. 3 hard drives. 2 encrypted cloud vaults. 1 manila envelope mailed to my own apartment with "in case of arrest" written on it. Because I was going nuclear. Lena was the next weak point. She had always been flashy, loved Instagram more than actual friends. And she documented everything. So I subpoenaed her phone logs and got her banking data through an old IT friend who owed me a favor. What I found made my stomach turn. The morning after my father passed, she and Samir transferred over $180,000 from a joint account he had with Dad, money meant for palliative care and final expenses. They spent $6,700 on a Cartier bracelet that same day. A day later, first-class tickets to Mykonos. 2 days later, a wire-labeled consultant retainer sent to a shell company in Dubai. That shell company was owned by Samir's college buddy and had been used before to launder money through fake consulting reports. This wasn't just inheritance theft. It was fraud. Once I had everything, I printed it, bound it, labeled it Exhibit 1 through 47. Then I filed a civil motion through a third-party firm I'd used during contract disputes at work, just to avoid tipping off anyone. The court date was set. 2 weeks later, they received the notice. Lena called me crying. Samir called me raging. Their attorney sent a cease and desist. I sent back a notarized letter with the will and the full financial packet. 3 days later, their house was seized for financial review. And a week after that, Gerald's law license was suspended. I wasn't just getting justice. I was disassembling their world one receipt at a time. I used to think betrayal came with yelling, with slammed doors and red faces. But real betrayal? It wears a suit. It speaks softly. It smiles while stabbing you. Gerald, the man who once bounced me on his knee during Dad's law office meetings, was the orchestrator of the cleanest backstab I'd ever seen. The suspended license was only the beginning. While digging into his emails, we uncovered a series of encrypted exchanges with Lena and Samir dating back 6 months before my father passed. They weren't reacting to his death. They were preparing for it. He had advised them how to move money while my father was still alive but weakened. He suggested strategic document adjustments to make an old will look legally airtight. He even drafted resignation letters from Dad's investment advisors so he could recommend his own friendly replacements. The kicker? He'd set up a side trust, diverting residuals from Dad's international investments to a blind account in the Cayman Islands. I couldn't prove Gerald owned the account. But I did find proof that Samir did. In one email, Gerald had attached a fund flow proposal for Samir's review. The attachment included a list of shell corporations, each with a dotted line back to accounts Samir had previously accessed. The web of lies wasn't sloppy. It was surgical. And it had taken years to construct. I wasn't alone, though. One of Gerald's junior associates, her name was Lena, slipped me a sealed envelope. No return address. Inside was a handwritten ledger. Dates. Amounts. Meetings. One note read. June 4th, Samir in office again. Asked about power of attorney workaround. Gerald said to use template number 7 and backdate. I pretended not to hear. Lena hadn't gone to the police. She knew she'd lose everything. But giving it to me? That was her way out. I owed her more than she knew. I presented the ledger to my legal team. My lead counsel, Clarence, a ruthless ex-prosecutor, nearly spit out his coffee. This isn't just civil fraud, he said. This is criminal conspiracy. And with that, we had what we needed. Not just for restitution, but for revenge. The kind that comes in handcuffs. People think revenge is loud. But the real kind? It brews in silence. It grows behind quiet walls. And when it finally steps into the light, it's already too late. After Clarence confirmed we had enough for a criminal case, I changed tactics. No more confronting. No more phone calls or warnings. Just planning. I rented a small, windowless office in a building downtown, paid in cash, under a friend's LLC. Inside, I set up a war room, timelines on the wall, red string across laminated financials, USB sticks labeled like evidence lockers. Every morning before work, I'd sit there in silence. Plotting. Printing. Documenting. Connecting dots. While Lena and Samir were busy uploading brunch photos and pretending their world was perfect, I was quietly freezing their future. I filed injunctions to halt asset transfers. Flagged their accounts with FinTrack for suspicious activity. Sent anonymous tips to 2 journalists, one financial, one crime. And then I did something I knew would push Samir off the rails. I had his car repossessed. Not legally, yet. But through a quiet call to the leasing company letting them know the payments hadn't gone through, they hadn't, he was living off siphoned inheritance. The tow truck showed up in front of his gym. He posted about it on Instagram, trying to act unfazed. But I saw the cracks. Meanwhile, my mother, who had stayed painfully neutral, finally called me. I saw the news, she whispered. What news? I asked, even though I knew. She meant the anonymous exposé published in the Sunday paper. Inheritance Games, When Blood Isn't Thicker Than Greed. It outlined a case almost identical to mine, with pseudonyms and composite figures. But everyone close to us knew exactly who it was about. I didn't know they were doing all this, she said quietly. Not like this. They didn't just take money, Mom, I said. They left me to starve. By the end of that week, Gerald's firm had issued a statement claiming no knowledge of his activities and opened an internal ethics review. Samir went dark on social media. And Lena? She posted a story captioned "Some people can't handle your shine." It made me laugh. Because shine doesn't come from stealing a legacy. It comes from surviving the betrayal, building a case, and pulling the trigger at the right moment. And that moment? Was coming. Some revenge stories end in angry confrontations. Mine? It ended in handcuffs. And a front-page photo no amount of PR could scrub away. The morning it happened, I was sitting across from Clarence at our usual breakfast spot, nothing fancy, just greasy eggs and strong coffee. He checked his watch. They should be at the firm now, he said. I didn't reply. Instead, I kept stirring my coffee like it was just another Tuesday. But inside? I was vibrating. Months of paperwork, evidence, sealed affidavits, witness testimonies, all of it had led to this. The police weren't just going after Gerald. They were going after all three, Gerald, Samir, and Lena. It started with a knock at Gerald's law firm. Plainclothes officers walked past the receptionist with warrants already approved. His office door opened. He stood up, confused. They told him to put his hands behind his back. He didn't argue. Didn't shout. He just asked, "Is it the trust fund?" They didn't answer. Click. The cuffs went on. He was walked through the front lobby as junior associates looked up from their screens, stunned. Meanwhile, across the city, Samir was in the middle of brunch with Lena and one of their real estate investors. According to the report I later read, he had just lifted his mimosa when two uniformed officers entered the cafe. They called his full name, first, middle, last. He blinked, confused. They repeated it. And then, right there next to his bottomless French toast, Samir was arrested for financial fraud, forgery, identity misrepresentation, conspiracy to defraud. Lena shrieked. The waiter dropped a plate. People filmed it. One video got 2.6 million views by the end of the day with the caption, "This investor couple just got dragged out like a Netflix scam doc live." The news hit the internet before I even left the diner. Gerald's firm issued a second statement. "We are cooperating fully with authorities and condemn any criminal conduct." Samir's accounts were frozen. His name was blacklisted from every partnership he tried to build. The investor groups he'd pulled out instantly, terrified of exposure. As for Lena? She tried to pretend it was all a misunderstanding. Until her name appeared on the warrant too. She wasn't arrested that day. But she was charged. And her mugshot? It came later, when she walked into the police station thinking she could talk her way out. Spoiler. She couldn't. I watched all of this unfold from my apartment. Curtains drawn. Phone on silent. And when the knock came at my door, this one from a courier, I opened it to find a letter from the court. Motion for full inheritance restitution approved. Property and assets to be reevaluated and returned to rightful heir. I exhaled. Not because it was over. But because it was fair. Finally. Justice hadn't come with shouting or fists. It came with facts. Files. And a long, long memory. If you've ever watched courtroom dramas, you think trials are about loud speeches and gasps from the audience. But real justice? It's quieter. Colder. More surgical. And when it's family on the stand, it cuts deeper than any blade. I sat in the front row. Not on the witness bench yet. Not at the defense table. Just close enough to look them in the eye. Gerald. Samir. Lena. Dressed in gray and beige suits that now looked more like costumes than confidence. They didn't look at me. Not even once. The prosecution opened strong. They laid out the timeline. My father's death. The day the will went missing. The illegal transfer of accounts. The forged signatures. The fraudulent access to trust funds. And worst of all, the intimidation tactics used against anyone who tried to ask questions. They presented screenshots of emails, voice recordings, video clips from inside Gerald's firm, and timestamps that matched bank transactions to the exact hour of my father's funeral. The room was silent. You could feel people shifting in their seats, because no one wanted to make a sound during this massacre of truth. Then came my turn on the stand. I'd rehearsed my testimony 1,000 times. But when I opened my mouth, I didn't need to act. I buried my father while they buried his legacy, I said. I talked about the missing will, the account closures, the false smiles at the funeral, how I was gaslit for months and made to feel like I was going crazy for believing something had been taken from me. I could see the jury react. Eyes narrow. One woman on the front row had to wipe away a tear. When I left the stand, Gerald finally looked at me. Not with regret. With hate. The kind of hate that says, "You beat me at my own game." I didn't look away. Their defense was chaos. Lena blamed Samir. Samir said he was misled by Gerald. Gerald tried to claim there had been conflicting instructions from my father and that he'd done what he believed was in the family's best interest. The prosecutor held up the original forged will and said, "So in the family's best interest, you created a fake document, signed it as power of attorney, and funneled $1.4 million into a private Cayman account?" No one answered. They just stared down at the table like they hoped it would swallow them. Verdict? Guilty. On all counts. Gerald lost his license. He's serving 12 years without parole. Samir got 8 years. His fake investor business crumbled before he even got to prison. Lena got 5 years for conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction. The judge didn't mince words. This wasn't just theft. This was betrayal soaked in greed, and the fact you did it to your own blood is, frankly, repulsive. After the verdict, I walked past the courtroom doors, and reporters swarmed. I said nothing. I didn't need to. My silence was louder than their lies ever were. I thought justice would feel like celebration. But it didn't. It felt quiet. Not empty. Not sad. Just quiet. Like walking out into a street after a storm. The wreckage is still there. But the sky is clear. After the trial, I reclaimed what was mine. Not just the money. The truth. My father's name. And the legacy they tried to bury with him. It took almost 2 years, but I had the original will restored. The estate was returned to me, including the funds they hadn't already squandered on designer watches, club tables, and failed crypto scams. I used part of it to pay legal fees. Another part I donated. To a fund. One that helps people recover from estate fraud. A niche thing, maybe. But if you've ever been in my shoes, you know how much it matters. And then there was the rest. The house I grew up in? I didn't sell it. I turned it into something else, something permanent. A small community center. Workshops. Financial literacy classes. Pro bono legal advice. I named it after my father. The Tariq El Hassan Foundation. As for my cousins? They wrote me letters from prison. Not apologies. Excuses. Gerald tricked me. I just wanted to secure the family's future. I didn't think you'd find out. I never wrote back. Some wounds don't need to be reopened. Some silence is sacred. People sometimes ask me if I regret not confronting them earlier. If I wish I had exploded at the funeral. Or fought louder. But no. The best revenge? Is not a punch. Not a scream. It's a verdict. Signed. Stamped. Enforced. It's knowing they'll wake up every day behind bars remembering whose life they tried to ruin, and whose name they couldn't erase. I visit my father's grave often. Not to cry. Not to mourn. Just to talk. I tell him what I've done. What I've built. How I kept my promise. He always used to say, "Legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you defend." Now I understand. My name is Malik. I was 28 when they tried to erase me from my father's will. But I fought back. And I won. Not with hate. Not with violence. But with patience, truth, and the law. And I never needed an apology to find peace. Because justice is enough.